Chapter 1. The Discovery at the Flea Market. It was a sunny Sunday when Marc, a passionate collector of antiques, visited a flea market on the outskirts of the city. As he wandered through the aisles, he searched for a hidden gem, something that would catch his eye and speak to him of a distant past. His gaze finally landed on an old mirror, framed in intricately carved silver, covered with a thin layer of dust. The mirror had something fascinating about it. Although slightly tarnished, Marc was drawn to the strange patterns engraved on the frame. The seller, an elderly man with a wrinkled face, offered the mirror for a modest price, explaining that it was a family heirloom passed down through generations. Intrigued and unable to resist the mysterious aura of the object, Marc bought it and took it home. Once home, he placed the mirror in his living room, strategically positioned to catch the natural light. He noticed that, despite its dirt, the mirror seemed to emit a strange glow whenever he passed by it. Determined to restore the object to its former glory, Marc began to clean it with care. As he polished the silver frame, his fingers slipped over a small crack on the back of the mirror. Curious, he leaned in to examine the fissure and with some effort managed to remove a thin piece of wood that covered a secret compartment. Inside, he found a small notebook yellowed with age and a carefully folded letter. Marc's heart raced. He unfolded the letter, written in a neat, elegant hand. It began with the words, "To the one who discovers this mirror, know that you hold in your hands a cursed relic bearing a tragic and eternal love." Intrigued, he opened the notebook and began to read, uncovering the story of an ancient love full of passion and suffering. Chapter 2. The Story of Élise and Gabriel. The notebook told the story of Élise, a young woman from a noble family, and Gabriel, a talented but poor artist living in Paris at the beginning of the 19th century. Their love, forbidden by the social conventions of the time, drove them to meet in secret. The mirror, a gift from Gabriel to Élise, was their means of communication in their absence. Gabriel, deeply in love, had engraved an ancient symbol he had found in an old grimoire into the mirror's frame. He believed this symbol could bind their souls for eternity, allowing them to find each other even in the afterlife. However, this act, though romantic, triggered a series of tragic events. One evening, after an argument with her family, Élise abruptly left her home to find Gabriel. But a sudden storm broke out, and in her frantic rush, Élise fell into a river and drowned. Gabriel, devastated by the loss of his beloved, committed suicide by throwing himself off the bridge where they had often met. The curse of the mirror then manifested. Each person who owned the mirror after their death saw their tragic love reflected in their own life. Élise and Gabriel's souls, unable to find peace, were trapped in the mirror, desperately trying to reunite. Chapter 3. The First Visions. In the following days, Marc began to sense a strange presence in his apartment. Shadows seemed to move at the edges of his vision, and sometimes he thought he heard soft but incomprehensible whispers. But it was the first vision that truly terrified him. One night, as he was getting ready for bed, he glanced at the mirror one last time. To his horror, the reflection did not show his own face, but that of a young woman dressed in 19th century clothing, her eyes filled with sadness. She stared at him intensely, as if trying to convey a message. Terrified, Marc took a step back, but the vision did not disappear. Instead, the scene in the mirror changed, now showing a man, likely Gabriel, walking alone in the pouring rain, looking desperate. The images seemed to float, mix and repeat, creating an endless cycle of pain and loss. Marc felt increasingly drawn to the mirror, as if it were calling to him. Each vision seemed more real than the last, and he began to lose track of time. By day, he tried to continue his normal life, but by night, the mirror absorbed him into this tragic world. Chapter 4. The Quest for Answers. Determined to understand what was happening, Marc embarked on a search for the mirror's history. He combed through municipal archives, visited old bookstores, and even consulted experts in the occult. All clues led him to the same conclusion. The mirror was linked to a cursed love. And as long as Élise and Gabriel's souls were not at peace, the visions would continue to haunt whoever owned the object. He also discovered that the symbol Gabriel had engraved on the mirror's frame was an ancient sigil used to summon spirits or seal pacts. Gabriel, in his despair, had unintentionally trapped their love in an endless cycle of suffering. One evening, as he once again pored over Elise's notebook, Marc found an intriguing hint. A passage mentioned an ancient ritual that could finally allow the souls to find peace. However, the ritual required a sacrifice. The person performing it would have to give up something precious, an act of pure generosity. Chapter 5. The Ritual of Release. Marc decided to attempt the ritual. He gathered the necessary elements, candles, sacred herbs, and a medallion belonging to Gabriel, which he had found in an antique shop. On the night of the winter solstice, he prepared everything in a room lit only by candlelight. He recited the incantations carefully, following the instructions in the notebook to the letter. As he spoke, the shadows in the room thickened and the mirror began to emit a strange light. Suddenly the images of Élise and Gabriel appeared again, but this time they seemed more real, as if they were about to cross through the mirror. The decisive moment of the ritual approached. Marc had to give up something precious. He realized that what mattered most to him was the freedom to live without being haunted by this mystery. So, in a symbolic gesture, he placed a photo of his family in front of the mirror, indicating that he was willing to sacrifice his own happiness to free the souls. At that moment, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The mirror suddenly shattered and Marc felt a sharp pain in his heart, as if a part of himself was being torn away. Then, everything became calm. The shadows disappeared, and the mirror, now broken into 1,000 pieces, reflected nothing but shards of light. Élise and Gabriel's souls were finally free. Chapter 6. The End of the Cycle. Marc woke up the next morning, lying on the floor of his living room. The mirror was nothing more than a pile of broken glass, and a strange peace reigned in the room. He felt exhausted, but at the same time relieved. He knew that the tragic story of Élise and Gabriel had finally found its conclusion. He gathered the pieces of the mirror and buried them in a peaceful place, far from any habitation. With them, he also buried the notebook and the medallion, ensuring that these objects could no longer cause suffering. Although Marc had lost a precious piece of art, he had regained his peace of mind. He realized that some stories should never be forgotten, but sometimes they need to be laid to rest. And as he walked away from the place, a sense of reconciliation washed over him, as if Élise and Gabriel were thanking him. The enigma of the broken mirror was finally solved.